The cold wind moved softly across Winterfell, but something felt different in the air that day. It was not just winter coming. It was war, politics, and betrayal hiding behind smiles. When King Robert Baratheon arrived at Winterfell, everything looked the same on the outside. Laughter, feasts, old friendship. But inside, Lord Eddard Stark felt uneasy. He knew Robert was not the same man he once fought beside. The king was tired, drunk too often, and surrounded by Lannisters. Catelyn Stark noticed it too. That night, when Ned and Catelyn stood alone in their chamber, she spoke first. "Robert didn't come here only to see an old friend," she said quietly. "Ned removed his gloves slowly. He wants me to be Hand of the King." Catelyn did not look surprised. "And you will accept?" Ned looked at her. "I must. The realm is unstable. If I refuse, someone worse will take the position. Someone loyal to the Lannisters." Catelyn stepped closer. "Then if we go south, we do not go blindly. We prepare." That was the moment everything changed. In the original path of fate, Ned would go south, trusting honor alone. But this time, Catelyn's instincts were sharper. She had been raised in Riverrun, where politics were as dangerous as swords. She understood something Ned often ignored. Honor alone does not win thrones. The next morning, Catelyn secretly sent a raven to her sister, Lysa Arryn, in the Eyrie. But this time she did not just ask questions about Jon Arryn's death. She demanded proof, names, evidence, quiet alliances. At the same time, she sent another raven to her father, Lord Hoster Tully. "Prepare the Riverlands," the message said. "Quietly gather loyal banners. Do not speak of it." Before leaving Winterfell, Catelyn also did something unexpected. She called Robb into the Godswood. He was only 14, but he stood tall and strong. "You may soon be more than just the heir of Winterfell," she told him. Robb frowned. "What do you mean, Mother?" Catelyn looked at the heart tree, its red eyes watching. "The South is dangerous. If something happens to your father, the North must not kneel." Robb's face hardened. "The North remembers." She smiled slightly. "Yes, and the North must be ready." When Ned left for King's Landing, he did not go alone with only a few men. This time, he took double the guard. He also brought Maester Luwin's most trusted spies disguised as servants. Catelyn insisted. Meanwhile, in King's Landing, the game had already begun. Cersei Lannister watched Ned Stark carefully. She saw him as honorable, predictable, easy to manipulate. But she underestimated Catelyn. Within weeks, Catelyn arrived in King's Landing secretly, not publicly. She stayed hidden in Littlefinger's brothel under a false name. But she did not trust Littlefinger fully. She listened. She watched. And soon, she learned something powerful. Littlefinger was playing both sides. Varys was whispering secrets. And most importantly, Robert's children were not his. Catelyn confronted Ned one night in his chambers. "You cannot warn Cersei," she said firmly. Ned looked shocked. "She deserves a chance to escape with her children. I will not murder them." Catelyn's voice grew cold. "If you warn her, she will strike first, and she will not show mercy to our children." Ned was silent. For the first time in his life, he felt torn between honor and survival. That same week, Catelyn arranged something dangerous. She secretly met Renly Baratheon. "You know the truth," she told him. Renly did not deny it. "If Robert dies," Catelyn continued, "Joffrey cannot sit the throne. The realm will tear itself apart. But if the North and the Stormlands unite," Renly's eyes sharpened. "You speak boldly for a woman." "I speak as a mother," she replied, "and as someone who wants stability." Renly leaned back. "And who would sit the throne?" Catelyn's answer was simple. Robb Stark. Renly laughed at first, but Catelyn continued calmly. The North is strong. The Riverlands will stand with us. If you support Robb as king, you become his closest ally, perhaps even Hand of the King. Renly stopped laughing. This was not madness. This was strategy. Meanwhile, Ned finally gathered proof about Joffrey's true parentage. He held the truth in his hand like a blade. In the original fate, he would confront Cersei and give her time. But this time, Catelyn stood beside him. "No warnings," she whispered. The night Robert was fatally wounded by the boar, everything moved quickly. Before Cersei could act, before Littlefinger could betray, before the city watch could be bought, Renly Baratheon arrived at the Tower of the Hand with 100 loyal knights. And Ned Stark was ready. When Robert died, Joffrey tried to claim the throne, but the throne room doors opened with a crash. Renly entered in full armor. Behind him stood Stark guards, and beside them, the city watch, already paid with northern gold and promises of protection. Cersei realized too late. Ned stepped forward. "Joffrey Baratheon is not the true son of Robert," he announced loudly. Gasps filled the hall. Catelyn stood behind him, calm and silent. This time, there was no arrest. There was no public execution. Cersei and her children were seized immediately. Tywin Lannister, far away in the west, had not yet moved his armies, and for the first time in history, the North had struck first. Far in Winterfell, a raven arrived. Robb read it slowly. Then he looked at the northern lords gathered in the great hall. "My father has removed the false king," Robb said. "The realm is unstable. The Iron Throne is unstable. The Iron Throne stands empty." Silence filled the hall. Then great Jon Umber stood up. "And who do we follow now?" Robb's voice was steady. "We do not follow." He lifted his father's banner. "We rule." The North roared, and far in King's Landing, Catelyn Stark allowed herself one small smile. The game was no longer being played against them. Now, they were playing to win. The news did not reach Tywin Lannister gently. It arrived like a blade wrapped in silk. He was sitting in Casterly Rock when the raven came. The message was short, but every word was heavy. Cersei imprisoned. Joffrey removed. Ned Stark controls King's Landing. Renly Baratheon supports him. Tywin read it twice. His face did not change, but the room felt colder. "They moved before we did," he said quietly. Kevan Lannister shifted uneasily. "What are your orders?" Tywin stood up slowly. "Call the banners, all of them. This is no longer politics. This is war." In King's Landing, things were not peaceful either. Ned Stark sat in the Tower of the Hand, staring at the Iron Throne from a distance. He never wanted it. He never dreamed of it. But now the throne stood empty, and the realm waited. Renly had gathered the small council. "The people must see strength," Renly said. "If we look weak, the Lannisters will march straight through the Riverlands." Catelyn stepped forward calmly. "They will march anyway." All eyes turned to her. She continued, "Tywin Lannister will not beg. He will not negotiate. He will burn villages to prove a point. We must secure allies before his army reaches Harrenhal." Renly nodded. "The Stormlands are with us." Ned added, "The North stands united behind Robb." There was silence for a moment. Then Varys spoke softly from the shadows. "And what of Stannis?" The room grew tense. Stannis Baratheon was Robert's older brother. By law, he had the strongest claim to the throne. But Stannis was hard, cold and unforgiving. He would never support a Stark boy king. Catelyn answered carefully, "We send him a letter, offer him Dragonstone and position as master of ships, give him respect, not the throne." Renly smirked slightly. "He will like that." "No," Catelyn said. "But he will like war even less. Far away in Winterfell, Robb Stark was no longer just a boy training with wooden swords. He stood before banners of the North, Umber, Karstark, Mormont, Bolton. His voice was steady, but inside he felt the weight of everything. "My father holds King's Landing," Robb said. "But the Lannisters gather their forces in the west. They will attack the Riverlands first." Roose Bolton's pale eyes watched carefully. "And what is your command, my lord?" Robb remembered his mother's words. "Strike first." "We march south," Robb said. "We march south," Robb said. "We do not wait behind our walls. We meet them before they reach Riverrun." The Grecian laughed loudly. "Now you sound like a Stark." The northern army began to move, thousands of men crossing the neck like a cold wave. Meanwhile, in a dark cell beneath the Red Keep, Cersei Lannister sat in chains. Cersei Lannister had lost her crown, but not her pride. When Catelyn visited her, Cersei did not stand. "You think you've won," Cersei said quietly. Catelyn looked at her with calm eyes. "No, I think we survived." Cersei gave a cold smile. "My father will burn the world before he lets your son sit that throne." Catelyn stepped closer. "Then perhaps he loves his legacy more than his children." For the first time, Cersei's expression flickered, because she knew it was true. The first real blood was spilled at the Golden Tooth. Tywin's forces moved fast, smashing through Riverland defenses. Villages burned, farmers fled. But they did not expect the North to move so quickly. Robb split his army in two. One force moved openly, drawing Tywin's attention. The second, led by Robb himself and guided by Grey Wind, moved silently through forest paths. At night, they attacked a Lannister supply camp. It was fast, brutal. When morning came, hundreds of Lannister soldiers were dead and their food stores burned. Robb stood over the battlefield, breathing hard. His first real victory. Word spread quickly. "The young wolf has drawn blood." Tywin received the report with narrowed eyes. "He fights like his father," Kevan said. Tywin shook his head slowly. "No, Eddard Stark would have waited. This boy attacks in the dark." There was almost a hint of respect in his voice. Back in King's Landing, tension grew. Some lords whispered that placing a Stark on the throne would anger the southern houses. Others feared war would tear the Seven Kingdoms apart. Renly approached Ned privately. "You must decide," Renly said. "Will Robb claim the Iron Throne openly, or do we rule in his name until the realm calms?" Ned stared out at the city. "I never wanted crowns," he said. Renly smiled faintly. "No one who wants them should have them." Ned turned. "Prepare the ceremony. Robb Stark will be named King of the Seven Kingdoms." Outside, the bells of King's Landing began to ring. But far in the west, Tywin Lannister mounted his horse. He looked toward the Riverlands. "Young wolf," he whispered. Then his voice hardened. "Let us see how long you can survive in a lion's den." And the real war, the war that would decide the fate of the Iron Throne, had only just begun. War does not begin with trumpets. It begins with doubt. And doubt had already entered the northern camp. The Stark army had won small victories. They burned Lannister supplies. They attacked at night. They moved fast and surprised everyone. Songs were already being sung about the young wolf. But victories bring attention, and attention brings jealousy. In the quiet tent of Roose Bolton, candles burned low. His pale eyes studied a fresh message sealed with a lion. He did not smile. He rarely did. But he read the words carefully. Tywin Lannister was offering terms, not peace. "Power. Support us when the time comes," the letter said, "and the North will need a new warden." Roose folded the letter slowly. He did not answer yet, but he did not burn it either. Meanwhile, near Riverrun, Robb Stark stood with his mother on a hill overlooking the campfires of their army. Robb Stark looked older now. War had taken away his boyhood quickly. "We hurt them," Robb said quietly. "But they keep coming." Catelyn stood beside him, calm but serious. "Your father holds King's Landing. That weakens Tywin. But lions are most dangerous when cornered." Robb looked at her. "Do you think we can win?" Catelyn did not lie. "Winning is not about battles. It is about loyalty. Keep your bannermen loyal, and you win." Robb nodded. "But loyalty is fragile." In King's Landing, tension was growing as well. Ned Stark stood before the Iron Throne, looking uncomfortable in the Grand Hall. Beside him stood Renly, dressed in bright armor, charming as always. The court was full. Southern lords whispered among themselves. A northern boy on the throne? Winter ruling summer? It will not last. Ned raised his voice. "Robb Stark will be crowned within the month," he announced. "The realm will remain united. The laws will remain the same. There will be no revenge killings, no unjust punishments." His eyes moved across the room slowly. "This is not conquest. This is protection." Some nodded. Others did not. In the shadows, Pettier Baelish watched everything carefully. Littlefinger did not like stable kingdoms. Stable kingdoms meant fewer opportunities. He approached Ned later in private. "You've moved quickly, my lord," Littlefinger said softly, "but speed can create cracks." Ned did not trust him. "Speak clearly." Littlefinger smiled slightly. "The Reach has not declared support. Highgarden is silent. That was dangerous. The Reach had the largest army in the Seven Kingdoms. If they side with the Lannisters," Littlefinger continued, "your son will be fighting two wars." Ned's jaw tightened. Back in the Riverlands, Robb prepared for a larger battle. Tywin's full army was moving toward them now. This would not be a raid in the night. This would not be a raid in the night. Bah! Before sunrise, Robb gathered his commanders. "We divide again," Robb said. "Bolton will hold the center. The Great John takes the left. I'll lead the right." Roose Bolton's pale eyes flickered slightly. "As you command, my king." The title sounded respectful, but something in his tone felt empty. The battle that followed was brutal. Steel clashed against steel. Horses screamed. Men died in mud and blood. Tywin Lannister watched from a hill, calm and calculating. His forces were larger, better armored, but the North fought like wolves. Robb rode through the chaos with grey wind beside him. His sword cut down one Lannister knight after another. He was fearless, almost reckless. At one moment he was nearly surrounded. 3 Lannister soldiers closed in. But suddenly arrows flew from the trees. Karstark men, they saved him. The northern army pushed hard on the right flank. Tywin noticed. "Shift reserves," he ordered calmly. And then it happened. The center line, commanded by Roose Bolton, began to fall back too quickly. Not in panic, in order. Too ordered. It created a gap. Tywin's cavalry saw it and charged straight through. Chaos exploded. Northern soldiers were cut down from behind. Robb realized too late. The center had weakened. He pulled back his forces, barely preventing complete disaster. By sunset, the field was filled with bodies. The battle was not a total loss, but it was not a victory either. Thousands were dead, and doubt grew stronger. That night, inside his tent, Robb stood silent. Catelyn entered slowly. Catelyn entered slowly. "You are blaming yourself," she said. "I trusted Bolton," Robb answered quietly. Catelyn's eyes hardened slightly. "Trust is earned every day." "Not once." Robb clenched his fist. "He withdrew too early." "Did he?" she asked softly. Robb looked up at her, and for the first time, the idea of betrayal entered his heart. Far away in the west, Tywin received word of the battle's outcome. He nodded slowly. Send another letter to Bolton, he said, and increase the offer. Back in King's Landing, news of the heavy losses reached Ned. Renly paced the room. If the North bleeds too much, Southern lords will hesitate. Ned's face was serious. Then we must end this quickly. Littlefinger stepped forward with a soft smile. There is one way to end wars quickly, my lord. Ned did not like that smile. What way? Littlefinger's voice was almost a whisper. Marriage. And suddenly, the game shifted again. Because now war was not only fought with swords, it would be fought with vows. War had slowed, but it had not stopped. The fields of the Riverlands were still red, and the air still carried the smell of smoke. Yet now, something more dangerous than swords began to move quietly between castles. Marriage. In King's Landing, the small council gathered again. The room felt tense. The Reach must be secured, said Petty Baelish smoothly. High Garden has power, food, and the largest army in the Seven Kingdoms. If they stand against us, the North will bleed dry. Ned Stark stood still. What are you suggesting? Littlefinger's smile was soft. A royal marriage. Bind them to the throne. Renly leaned forward, interested. Marjorie Tyrell. The name hung in the air. If Robb married Marjorie Tyrell, the North and the Reach would unite. The Lannisters would be trapped between two massive armies. But in the Riverlands, things were not so simple. Robb Stark sat inside Riverrun staring at the letter from King's Landing. His father's words were clear. Consider the alliance. It may secure peace. Robb folded the letter slowly. Peace. The word felt distant. Catelyn entered the room quietly. You have read it? Yes. And? Robb looked at his mother. They want me to marry Marjorie Tyrell. Catelyn studied his face carefully. It would give us the Reach. Robb nodded slowly. It would also make me a piece in their game. Catelyn did not argue, because he was right. But before Robb could answer, another message arrived. This one was different. It came from the twins. Walder Frey had sent his terms. You crossed my bridge once without promise, the letter said. You will not cross it again without marriage. Robb exhaled sharply. The Freys controlled the crossing at the twins. Without them, moving armies north and south would become slow and dangerous. Catelyn spoke carefully. If you refuse him, he may side with the Lannisters. And if I accept, Robb said quietly, I must marry one of his daughters. Politics was squeezing him from both sides. A Tyrell bride meant southern strength. A Frey bride meant northern movement. Both meant sacrifice. That night, in his private tent, Roose Bolton received another secret visitor, a Lannister messenger. You weakened your line as agreed, the man said quietly. Roose's pale eyes did not blink. It was not enough to lose the battle. The messenger nodded. Lord Tywin understands. He offers more. When the Starks fall, you will rule the North. Roose considered this silently. Not yet, he replied finally. The boy still inspires loyalty. The messenger lowered his voice. Then break that loyalty. Days later, Robb made his decision. He gathered his bannermen inside Riverrun's hall. The Reach offers strength, Robb said, but they are far. The Freys stand between us and home. We need the crossing. The Great John frowned. You would marry a Frey? Robb's jaw tightened. I will. Catelyn watched him carefully. She saw the pain in his eyes. He was giving up something personal for the survival of his people. A raven was sent to the twins. The agreement was made. Robb Stark would marry a daughter of Walder Frey. But in King's Landing, this news created tension. Renly was frustrated. The Tyrells will not wait forever. Ned looked troubled. The phrase necessary. Littlefinger's eyes gleamed slightly. Division. He liked division. The Tyrells may take offense, he said gently, and offended roses have thorns. Then something unexpected happened. Instead of anger, the Reach made a bold move. Margaery Tyrell herself sent a letter directly to Robb. It was not political. It was personal. She wrote about unity, about ending war, about how two young rulers could change the future of the realm. When Robb read it, something inside him shifted. For the first time, he saw a different path. If he married Margaery, he would unite North and South completely. The Freys would be angry, but the Reach's power could crush them if needed. Catelyn saw the conflict in his face. "You are thinking of breaking the Frey agreement." Robb looked at her slowly. "If I marry Margaery, the war ends faster." "And Walder Frey?" she asked. "He will rage," Robb admitted, "but he will not stand alone against us." Catelyn remained silent for a long moment. Breaking a vow, even a political one, was dangerous, but survival sometimes required risk. Far in the west, Tywin Lannister received new information. The boy considers marrying into the Reach. Tywin's fingers tightened slightly on the table. "If the North and Reach unite," Kevin said quietly, "we are surrounded." Tywin stood up slowly. "Then we must divide them before they unite." His voice was calm but deadly. "Send word to the Freys." And so, quietly, another seed of betrayal was planted. Not in battle, not in blood, but in broken promises. Robb had not yet chosen his final bride, but whichever path he chose, someone would feel betrayed, and in the Game of Thrones, betrayal always demands payment. The banners of House Frey moved in the wind above the twins, pale blue against a grey sky. The river below flowed calmly, almost peacefully, as if it did not know that blood often followed weddings in Westeros. Robb Stark rode toward the castle with his mother beside him. The sound of hooves echoed against stone. This was supposed to be a celebration, but nothing about it felt warm. Walder Frey stood waiting in the courtyard, thin and old, but with eyes that were sharp and alive. "So," Walder said with a dry smile, "the young wolf remembers his promises." Robb dismounted calmly. "House Stark does not forget its word." Catelyn noticed the small pause before Walder replied. "Good," the old man said, "because House Frey does not forgive easily." Inside the hall, long tables were prepared. Meat, bread, wine. More food than soldiers had eaten in weeks. Music filled the air, but the laughter felt forced. Robb had made his choice. He would honor the Frey agreement. He had written to King's Landing explaining his decision. The alliance with the Reach would have to wait. Politics could bend, honor could not, but something else had changed. Before coming to the twins, Robb had taken precautions. He remembered the weakened center in the last battle. He remembered Bolton's strange retreat. He remembered his mother's warning. Trust must be earned every day. So he had split his army again, but not for battle. Half of his strongest men camped outside the twins, hidden beyond the trees, quiet, alert, watching. If anything felt wrong, they would not be trapped inside stone walls. As the wedding feast began, Robb sat beside his Frey bride, Roslyn Frey, young and nervous but kind in her eyes. She was not what he expected. She did not speak with pride. She spoke softly. "I did not ask for this," she whispered to him gently. "Neither did I," Robb replied, honestly. For a moment, the tension between them softened. Across the hall, Roose Bolton sat still, pale as ever. His eyes moved slowly across the room, measuring everything. Beside him stood men, loyal to him, not laughing, not drinking much. Catelyn noticed. Her heart tightened. She leaned toward Robb. "Something feels wrong." Robb nodded slightly. I know. The music grew louder, wine flowed heavier. Then Walder Frey stood. Let us honor the king in the north. He called loudly. The hall cheered. But it was strange. The cheer came too late, too forced. Catelyn's eyes moved toward the doors. She noticed something. The guards had changed. The men near the exits were not Frey men she had seen earlier. They wore Bolton sigils beneath cloaks. Her breath stopped for 1 second. She turned sharply toward Roose Bolton. He did not look at her. Instead, he calmly lifted his cup and said quietly, almost to himself, "The North remembers." The doors of the hall slammed shut. The music stopped. Silence. Then crossbows appeared from the balconies above. But before the first bolt could fly, a horn sounded outside the castle walls. Loud, long, northern war horns. The hidden Stark forces had seen movement on the walls. They were already charging the gates. Chaos exploded. Flow flew, but Robb had not come unprepared. His direwolf, Grey Wind, had not been locked away this time. The massive wolf lunged at the first crossbowman, tearing him down before he could shoot. Stark soldiers inside the hall drew swords instantly. They had been warned quietly before entering. "Stay armed," Robb had told them. "Do not drink too much." Steel clashed inside the feast hall. Walder Frey screamed in anger. "You were supposed to be blind, boy." Robb cut down a Bolton man who charged toward him. "I learned." Robb answered coldly. Roose Bolton moved quickly toward a side exit, but he was stopped by the Greatjon and Burma, who blocked his path like a wall. "Leaving early?" the Greatjon growled. Outside, the hidden northern forces smashed into the twins' gates. Fire arrows flew into towers. Frey soldiers panicked. This was not the Red Wedding of betrayal. This was a failed trap. Inside the hall, Catelyn grabbed Walder Frey by the collar as guards dragged him down. "You chose the wrong side," she said calmly. Roose Bolton tried to fight his way out, but he was surrounded. He looked at Robb without fear. "You are still a boy," Bolton said quietly. "You will never hold the South." Robb stepped closer, breathing hard, blood on his blade. "Maybe not," he said, "but I will hold the North." Bolton was taken in chains. By dawn, the twins belonged to House Stark. Walder Frey was a prisoner, and the attempted betrayal had failed. News spread fast. The North had survived a trap. The young wolf was not naive. He was dangerous. In Casterly Rock, Tywin Lannister received the message. He did not show anger, but he did crush the letter in his hand. "They adapt," Kevan said carefully. Tywin's eyes were cold. "Then we adapt faster." Back at the twins, Robb stood on the wall beside his mother. "You were right," he said quietly. Catelyn looked at the rising sun. "No," she answered softly. "You were careful. That saved us." Robb looked south. "The Lannisters will strike harder now." "Yes," she said, "and so will we." The failed Red Wedding did not end the war. It made it more personal. And now, the Starks were no longer reacting. They were hunting. Tywin Lannister had lost patience. The failed betrayal at the twins had humiliated him. Roose Bolton captured, Walder Frey imprisoned. The North still united. Worse, the boy was learning. Tywin stood before a painted map of the Seven Kingdoms inside Casterly Rock. "If we cannot break the wolf from the outside," he said calmly, "we break him from the heart." Kevan looked confused. "Winterfell." Tywin shook his head slowly. "King's Landing." In King's Landing, things had grown tense but stable. Ned Stark ruled as protector of the realm until Robb could be crowned. Order had been restored. Taxes were fair again. The City Watch was loyal, but peace inside the city did not mean safety outside it. One night, A fleet was spotted on the horizon of Blackwater Bay. Ships flying no clear banners. Too many ships. Messengers ran through the Red Keep. Renly burst into the council chamber. Unknown fleet approaching from the west. Ned's face hardened. The Ironborn. But when the ships came closer, the truth became clear. Golden lions painted faintly beneath dark sails. Tywin had hired Selzales from Essos. Mercenaries. They did not care about honor or kings, only gold. And Tywin had plenty. The city bells began to ring. Chaos filled the streets. Small folk ran in fear. Merchants shut their shops. Ned moved quickly. Close the gates. Arm every man who can hold a spear. Renly prepared the city defenses. Archers lined the walls. Boiling oil was heated. But this was not just an attack from the sea. At the same time, Lannister forces marched from the west toward the city gates. It was a trap. King's Landing was surrounded. Far away in the Riverlands, Robb Stark received the Raven. His father was under siege. Robb's hands tightened around the parchment. "They're attacking the capital directly," he said. Catelyn stood beside him. Tywin knows he cannot win slowly anymore. Robb turned to his commanders. "We march south immediately." The Greatjon nodded. "It would be a hard ride." "Then ride hard," Robb answered. But they were days away. And King's Landing might not have days. The first attack came at dawn. Sail ships crashed against the harbor defenses. Flaming arrows rained down onto the docks. The smell of burning wood filled the air. Ned stood on the walls in full armor, sword in hand. He had not planned to fight another war in his lifetime. But here he was again. Beside him stood Renly Baratheon, bright and bold as ever. "If we survive this," Renly said with a small grin, "we deserve a song." Ned almost smiled. Then the gates shook. Lannister battering rams struck hard. Inside the city, panic spread quickly. Some lords whispered of surrender. But Ned would not surrender. Not with his son fighting for the realm. Not after everything. The second day was worse. Food supplies began to burn in the harbor. The Selzales breached part of the outer wall. Street fighting began. Blood ran through cobblestone streets. Then, something unexpected happened. From the southern road, banners appeared. Not lions, not wolves. Golden roses. The Reach had come. Marjorie Tyrell had convinced her father that a Stark victory was better than Lannister dominance. Highgarden's army smashed into Tywin's western forces from behind. The siege broke into confusion. Tywin had not expected them to move so soon. Inside the city, Renly saw the banners first. "The roses chose their side," he said with relief. Ned gave the order. "Open the gates. Push them back." The Stark and Baratheon forces charged outward while the Reach crushed from the rear. The Lannister sailors began retreating toward their ships. But many ships were already burning. Tywin watched from a distant hill as his forces collapsed under pressure from two sides. For the first time in years, the great lion tasted real defeat. He turned his horse slowly. "Retreat," he ordered calmly. By nightfall, the siege was over. King's Landing stood damaged but unbroken. The small folk cheered in the streets. The Reach and the North had fought together. Ned Stark stood at the city gates. When Marjorie Tyrell entered with her army, she dismounted gracefully. "My lord," she said politely. Ned bowed his head slightly. "You have our gratitude." She smiled softly. "The realm needs stability." But her eyes carried something deeper. Ambition. Days later, Robb finally arrived with his northern host. He rode through the gates to thunderous cheers. Father and son met in the courtyard of the Red Keep. For a moment, there were no soldiers, no banners, only family. "You held it," Robb said quietly. Ned looked at him with pride. "So did you." But even in victory, something lingered in the air, because Tywin Lannister was still alive, still powerful. And now, cornered, Catelyn watched the celebrations carefully. They will not stop. she whispered to Ned that night. No, Ned agreed. This is not over. Because when lions are wounded, they become more dangerous than ever, and Tywin Lannister was preparing something darker, something final. Tywin Lannister had lost battles, but he had not lost the wall. He returned to Casterly Rock quiet and calm, which was always when he was most dangerous. Defeat did not break him, it sharpened him. They believe they are united, he said to Kevan one evening. North and Reach, Stark and Tyrell. But alliances built in war are fragile. Kevan studied him carefully. What are you planning? Tywin's eyes were cold. If I cannot defeat the wolf with claws, I will poison his pack. In King's Landing, victory had made the city alive again. The people cheered Robb's name when he walked through the streets. The story of the failed Red Wedding had spread. The story of the broken siege had spread even faster. Robb Stark was no longer just a Northern boy. He was becoming a symbol. Inside the Red Keep, preparations began for his official coronation as King of the Seven Kingdoms. Lords from across the realm arrived to swear loyalty. Among them were the Tyrells. Margaery Tyrell moved gracefully through court, speaking kindly to the small folk, smiling at soldiers, charming everyone she met. She understood something Robb did not fully see yet. The throne was not won only with swords. It was won with hearts. One evening, she walked with Robb in the gardens. You could unite the realm completely, she said softly. Robb looked at her. By marrying you. She did not deny it. The North loves you. The Reach can feed the realm. Together, there would be no rebellion strong enough to stand. Robb, he had honored his word to the phrase, but that marriage had never truly been sealed in the way politics required. The phrase were broken. Walder was a prisoner. The alliance was dust. Catelyn had already begun to consider the Tyrell match seriously, peace through power. But far away, Tywin sent secret letters, one to Dorne, one to the Iron Islands, and one, the most dangerous, to someone inside King's Landing. Petyr Baelish read Tywin's message alone in his chamber. Gold, lands, Harrenhal confirmed as his seat, protection if the Lannisters regained control, all in exchange for one thing: chaos. Littlefinger smiled slightly. Chaos was his specialty. The coronation day arrived bright and clear. The great sept was filled with banners, direwolves and golden roses side by side. Ned Stark stood proudly as his son walked forward. Catelyn watched with quiet relief. After all the blood, all the betrayal, they had made it here. Robb knelt before the High Septon. The crown was lifted, and then a scream. At first it sounded distant, then another. The doors of the sept burst open. Men rushed inside, not in Lannister red, but in mixed armor. Mercenaries, paid killers. Hidden among the crowd, blades flashed, panic exploded. Robb stood instantly, sword drawn. Renly shouted orders. Tyrell guards formed around Margaery, but the attackers were not aiming at Robb. They were moving toward Ned. Littlefinger's chaos had begun. In the confusion, one assassin broke through the line. He lunged toward Ned Stark. Catelyn screamed his name. Ned turned just in time, drawing his blade and cutting the man down. But another came from behind. Steel pierced through Ned's side. For a second, everything froze. Robb cut down the second attacker in a single brutal strike. The remaining assassins were quickly overwhelmed by guards. Silence slowly returned to the sept, but Ned Stark was on his knees, blood spreading across the stone floor. Robb caught him before he fell completely. "Father," Robb said, his voice shaking. Ned tried to speak. Blood touched his lips. "You must rule stronger than I did," he whispered. Robb's eyes filled with fury and pain. "We won," Robb said desperately. Ned gave a faint, tired smile. "Then keep it." His hand fell. The great sept of Baelor, meant to celebrate a coronation, had become a place of mourning. Outside, the city trembled with rumors. Lannister plot, Dornish revenge, Ironborn attack. But Robb knew one thing clearly. This was no random act. This was Tywin, and someone inside the city had helped him. Catelyn stood beside her son that night in the throne room. Grief was heavy in the air. "You cannot break now," she told him softly. Robb's face had changed. The boy was gone. Only a king remained. "I won't," he said quietly. Across the hall, Littlefinger watched with careful eyes. He had expected more chaos, more collapse. Instead, he saw something else forming. Unity through anger. Marjorie approached Robb gently. "The realm will stand with you," she said. Robb looked at her. "No," he answered calmly. "The realm will march." He turned to his commanders. "Prepare the full army. North, reach, Stormlands." His voice was cold now. "We end House Lannister." Far away in Casterly Rock, Tywin received news of the failed assassination. He closed his eyes for a long moment. "So," he said quietly, "the wolf grows teeth." War was no longer about crowns. It was about blood. And the final battle was coming. The North did not weep for long. It prepared. Ned Stark was buried in the Godswood of King's Landing, beneath a weirwood tree brought from the north years ago. The ceremony was quiet. No loud speeches. No grand promises. But something changed that day. Robb Stark did not cry in public. He did not shout. He did not rage. He became cold. And that frightened people more than grief ever could. Within a week, the largest army the realm had seen in decades began to move west. Northern banners, golden roses of the Reach, stormlords loyal to Renly. Even some riverlords who had once feared the Lannisters now marched proudly. It was no longer a rebellion, it was an execution. Inside the war tent, Robb stood over a map of the Westerlands. Beside him stood Catelyn, Renly, and Marjorie. "We do not siege Casterly Rock," Robb said calmly. Renly looked surprised. "It is the seat of power." "Yes," Robb replied, "which means it is prepared for siege." He moved a carved wolf south on the map. "We cut off their gold, their mines, their trade roads. We starve the lion." Marjorie nodded slowly. "The Reach can control supply lines from the south." Catelyn studied her son. He was thinking like a ruler now, not a boy seeking glory. But Tywin Lannister was not idle. Inside Casterly Rock he stood tall as ever. "They think they can starve us," Kevan said quietly. Tywin's voice was calm. "Then we force them into one final battle." He sent word to every remaining loyal house. Promises, threats, gold, and one more message. To Dorne. If he could not win with strength alone, he would use desperation. The two armies finally met on the plains outside Lannisport. It was massive. Lines of soldiers stretched across the horizon, steel shining beneath the sun, war drums echoing like thunder. Robb rode at the front on a black horse, grey wind running beside him. Across the field, Tywin Lannister sat tall in golden armor. The wolf and the lion. At last, the horns sounded, and the world exploded into chaos. The first charge shook the ground. Northern infantry slammed into Lannister shields. Reach cavalry swept around the flanks. Arrows darkened the sky. Robb fought at the center, cutting through soldiers with controlled fury. It was not reckless anymore. He moved with purpose. Across the field, Tywin directed troops calmly, adjusting lines, sending reinforcements exactly where needed. The Lannisters fought like cornered beasts. For hours, neither side broke. Then something unexpected happened. A third banner appeared on the horizon. red sun pierced by a spear. Dawn. For one terrible moment, Robb feared they had come for Tywin, but as they approached, their formation shifted. They struck the Lannister rear. Tywin's eyes narrowed for the first time. Dawn had chosen revenge for Elia Martell, and they blamed the Lannisters more than the Starks. The Lion was surrounded. Robb saw the confusion in Lannister lines. He raised his sword high. Now, the Northern cavalry charged straight toward Tywin's command position. Chaos spread quickly. Kevan Lannister fell under a spear. Lannister banners began to drop one by one. Still, Tywin did not run. He stood firm, sword drawn. Robb reached him at last. The battlefield seemed to fade around them. "You should have stayed in the north," Tywin said coldly. "You should have left my family alone," Robb replied. They fought. Tywin was older but skilled and precise. Robb was faster, stronger, fueled by loss. Steel clashed again and again. Tywin aimed for Robb's wounded shoulder from an earlier battle. A smart move, but Robb anticipated it. He shifted, stepped inside Tywin's guard, and drove his blade forward. The Golden Lion staggered. For the first time, Tywin Lannister looked surprised. He fell to his knees. The battlefield slowly quieted as word spread. Tywin Lannister was dead. The Lannister army broke. Some surrendered. Some ran. Some were cut down. By sunset, the Westerlands had fallen. Weeks later, Robb Stark stood in the throne room of King's Landing once more. But this time, there was no interruption, no assassins, no hidden blades. The High Septon placed the crown upon his head, King of the Seven Kingdoms. Margaery Tyrell stood beside him, now his queen, sealing the alliance between North and Reach. Catelyn watched from below. Her husband was gone, but his son had survived, and more than that, he had won. Renly bent the knee first, then Dawn, then the Stormland. One by one, the realm accepted the new order. The North did not kneel this time. It ruled. That night, Robb stood alone before the Iron Throne. It looked less glorious up close, more dangerous, more heavy. He touched the cold metal. Victory had cost him his father, cost thousands of lives, but it had secured something bigger. Stability. No more lions plotting in shadows. No more false kings. Catelyn entered quietly. "You did it," she said softly. Robb looked at her. "No," he replied. "We did." Outside, the city slept peacefully for the first time in years. The wolf banner flew high above King's Landing. And for the first time in the history of Westeros, winter did not fear the south. The Game of Thrones had ended, and House Stark sat upon it.